to my colleague from Connecticut who's been a leader on this issue and who in 2008 helped boost up the nutrition components of the Farm Bill, which made it a better Farm Bill and helped millions of people. So I yield to Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro.
I want to thank my colleague, Congressman McGovern, and I want to say a thank you to you. You have been steadfast and courageous on this issue, and I know the strong and personal relationship that you had with Senator McGovern, who every fiber of his being was devoted to making sure that both in the United States domestically and overseas that people, and particularly children, had enough to eat. And I think it was so special that he partnered with a Bob Dole of Kansas. And when you take a look at that early commission report that you spoke about, when you take a look at the people who were involved, the strength of that commission on hunger in America was its bipartisanship. And you know, since this effort has begun, members of both sides of the aisle have focused on this as a substantial problem, and therefore, as a nation, we had to come together to try to address it. And unfortunately, today, in the environment, in the atmosphere, in this body, in this institution, in the Congress, there seems to be not much view that this is a problem, and one that we have the opportunity, the capacity, and the ability to do something about. And what we lack, as you've said so often in the past, is the will, the political will to do something. And we are highlighting tonight the severe, the immoral cuts made to anti-hunger and nutrition programs, and particularly the food stamp program in the House Farm Bill. And again, as you pointed out, millions of families, they're struggling in this economy. We've had the worst recession since the Great Depression, and people are trying to survive. We're looking at an unemployment rate that is 7.5%. We are looking at incomes which are not increasing, but wages that are decreasing. And why we would pick this moment to really to throw more people into poverty. And you can take a look at all kinds of statistics, and I'll quote some in a few minutes that talk about the food stamp program and how it has kept people from falling into poverty and how it has kept kids from going hungry. And we would choose this moment to increase that poverty number and to say to children and disabled and seniors, I'm sorry, you're on your own. That's what this is about. It is immoral. You know, you talked about the 50 million Americans. Almost 17 million children suffer with hunger right now. It's a problem across the country. Let me talk about my district, the 3rd District of Connecticut. Connecticut, statistically, is the richest state in the nation. We have a very affluent portion of the state, which is known as Fairfield County, sometimes referred to as the Gold Coast. Lots of people on Wall Street come to live in Fairfield County in Connecticut. And yet, in my congressional district, the 3rd District, 1 out of 7 go to bed hungry at night. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. 1 out of 7 individuals nationwide take part in the food stamp program. People today who never thought they would have to rely on food stamps are having to do so because they lost their job. They lost their income. And they're looking for a way to feed their families. I was at the Christian Cornerstone Church in Milford, Connecticut, just a few days ago. A young woman, Penny Davis. She was working, taking care of herself, taking care of her family. She lost her job. She didn't think much about it. She would get another job. She hasn't been able to get another job in this economy. In the meantime, in the interim, she's become separated from her husband. She's now responsible for herself and her family. She didn't know what she was going to do. She called on the Christian Cornerstone Church. She called on the food bank to help her, to see what she could do. She spoke eloquently about wanting to work and not being able to find a job. And so today, she's accessed a program that she never thought she would have to use, the food stamp program. Why can't we be there to help people bridge that gap? Because the genius of this program is that in difficult times, the numbers of participants go up. But when the economy gets better, those numbers come down. And the numbers are coming down. So why at this moment would we jeopardize these folks' livelihoods, their well-being, and their ability to eat and to feed their families? And you know, we've got a wonderful, wonderful phrase these days that we use about people being food insecure. Plain and simple, and you know this, Congressman McGovern, this is people being hungry. They're hungry. Makes you feel good to talk about food insecurity, but it's hunger. And I talked about my district, but let's take a look. Mississippi, 24.5% suffer food hardship. They're hungry. Nearly 1 in 4 people. West Virginia and Kentucky, that drops to just over 22%, 1 in 5. In Ohio, nearly 20%. California, just over 19%. The estimates of Americans at risk of going hungry here in the land of plenty are appalling. And we have a moral responsibility to do something about this. And our key federal food security programs become all the more important at this time, which, as you know and I know and so many others know, it is true of the food stamp program. It is the country's most important effort to deal with hunger here at home. And it ensures that American families can put food on the table. 47 million Americans, half are kids. This is about helping low-income children's health and development, reducing food hunger in America, and continuing to have an influence so that those youngsters can have positive influences and opportunity into adulthood. You stated it. Food stamps has one of the lowest error rates of any government program. It's 3.8%. And I was upstairs at that Rules Committee meeting as well. You know, I love the discussion about program integrity. Many, many times in the Agricultural Appropriations Committee, where I did serve as chairman for a while, I'm still a member of the committee, probably 16, 18 years on that committee. Program integrity. Let's cut back on the waste, the fraud, and the abuse. And the only programs that get debated in those efforts are WIC, food stamps, other nutrition programs. No one bothers to take a look at the defense bill. No one bothers to take a look within the farm bill of other instances of waste, fraud, and abuse. We believe in program integrity for every program in the federal government, not just 1 or 2, or pick out the programs that you don't like and focus in on them. You talked about, I have sat on the Appropriations Committee in Agriculture. for the last 16 or 17 years. I chaired that Appropriations Committee. I was part of a conference committee on the Farm Bill in 2008. And in fact, as you've heard me say in the past, that appropriators don't usually get on to a conference committee, but the then Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, appointed me there particularly for the nutrition issues. And some of the conferees were a little nervous, and as I've said, they thought I was some sort of an invasive species in this context. But we worked hard in that Farm Bill, and you know it because you worked hard on it. Because we said it was a safety net, and it is a safety net. The Farm Bill is a safety net, but it is a safety net for American farmers and for American families. And we need to have that safety net. And because with the then Speaker Pelosi's strong support and leadership, we passed the Farm Bill. We supported nutrition, anti-hunger programs. We made investments in the programs that targeted specialty crops and organic production. And we were there, and we voted for that bill. And I am for a Farm Bill. But that's not the case this time around. It's a different set of circumstances and a different environment, which is why, like you, I cannot support this Farm Bill. The changes that you talked about, in addition to the $20 billion in cuts to beneficiaries, you talk about the eligibility programs and the tool that states use to streamline the administration of the program. Went back years in working this system out. They would unravel all of that. And then they'd like to talk about the food stamp program and the low-income energy assistance program. And there are two separate issues, categorical eligibility and the tie with food stamps and the LIHEAP program, the low-income energy assistance program. They'll say that if you automatically, if you get LIHEAP, then you're automatically on the food stamp program. It's not true. You have to qualify. You have to qualify. I want to get to a couple of points that talk about qualifying and what people are forced to qualify and those who are not forced to qualify for the benefits that they receive in this Farm Bill. It's important, I think, to note that we were able to get funding for the food stamp program in the economic recovery program. You worked hard at that. I worked hard at that. The chair of the Appropriations Committee at that time, Mr. Obey, fought for those dollars. Now, what that has come to an end, the economic recovery program. So come the beginning of the next fiscal year, every single recipient of food stamps will see it's $37. We got confirmation. $37 a month in a cut. And this is what's happening in this Farm Bill will only add on. Important to note that our colleagues will say, well, we have a deficit and we're going to use this money and we're going to pay down the deficit. Very interesting to note. In the past 30 years, every major deficit reduction package signed into law on a bipartisan basis was negotiated to the principle of not increasing poverty or inequality in deficit reduction. Simpson-Bowles, the latest iteration of a deficit reduction package, which so many people said went too far in changing the aspects of the social safety net, did not cut the food stamp program to achieve its deficit reduction. We need to follow this bipartisan effort in the same way that we did in these instances on deficit reduction, and follow that bipartisan road the same way we did in the recognition of the problem and the willingness to do something about it. About two other points. You may hear from some that the direct payments, they'll say, well, we're cutting direct payments in the Farm Bill, and that the bill also makes very real reforms to the crop support programs. The bill finally ended direct payments, saving about $47 billion over 10 years. But the commodity title of the bill only says that they're saving $18.6 billion. Why? Why the differential? Because the rest of those savings are being plowed back into the commodity support programs. It creates a brand new program which is called a price loss program to protect these commodities if prices change. So in essence, that safety net is working for farmers. And I don't begrudge that. You want to provide a safety net for farmers? Fine. But where's the safety net? Where's the safety net for the benefits of the food stamp program? They're not there. Because the food stamp beneficiaries have nowhere else to go, as you pointed out, nowhere else to go in the Farm Bill to be made whole. Those who are receiving direct payments, they're going to be held harmless, if you will, through crop insurance and a new program, a shallow loss protection program that protects them if the commodity prices begin to fluctuate. Where is the protection for the food stamp beneficiaries? It's not there. So the only people who are going to lose benefits are the most vulnerable in our society today. It's wrong, and again, it's immoral. Now, the bill, as I said, expands the crop insurance program. I think it's important for people to understand that crop insurance, again, safety net, useful, good concept, very good. I wish it applied to our part of the country as it does to other parts of the country, but I don't know that the American taxpayers know this about the crop insurance program. Taxpayers, U.S. taxpayers, foot the bill for over 60% of the premiums for beneficiaries. Plus, U.S. taxpayers pick up the tab on administrative and operating costs for the private companies that sell the plans, including multinational corporations, some of whom trace back to companies in tax havens. Switzerland, Australia, Bermuda, Ireland, Bermuda, that's where these companies have their headquarters. So they're making out like bandits. We pick up the tab, they don't pay their fair share of taxes in the United States. It really is quite incredible. And because when you and I talked about, Congressman McGovern, that $4.50, there's an income threshold, there's a cap on the amount of money they can receive on the assets that they hold. This program in crop insurance, where 26 individuals received at least $1 million in a subsidy, at least $1 million, they're protected statutorily, and we can't find out who they are. We don't know who they are, but they have no income test, no cap, no income threshold, no asset test that they go through. They just get the money. They get the money. And you know what? They're eating, and they're eating well. More than 3 squares a day, I'll bet. But not our kids. Not our kids. Our kids are going to bed hungry. And this program, by the way, does not even require the minimum conservation practices that other farm programs have on the books. It is pretty extraordinary when you think about a family of 4, when you have to qualify for this program for eligibility, it is at less than 130% of poverty. And that means that a family of 4 has to live on $22,000 a month. You know, our colleagues in this institution who are taking the food stamp challenge, doing it for a week, some may do it for less, some may do it more, but you know what? They're not doing it every single day with their kids. Let me just, there's serious problems with this farm bill. There really are very, very serious problems, and it needs to be addressed. It should never have come out of the committee with $20 billion in cuts. Never. It shouldn't have happened. I might also add that the President, as my colleague I know, has issued a veto threat primarily because of the food stamp cuts. Just a couple of quotes I think are important. U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops said last year, quote, "We must form a circle of protection around programs that serve the poor and the vulnerable in our nation and throughout the world." Catholic leaders last month wrote, quote, "Congress should support access to adequate and nutritious food for those in need and oppose attempts to weaken or restructure these programs that would result in reduced benefits to hungry people." The groups that are, we received a letter today with asking us and asking representatives, there are, my God, there must be 80 or 90 organizations, probably over 100 organizations who are saying don't do this, including the bulk of the medical profession. We've got Bread for the World, Children's Health Watch, Jewish Council for Public Affairs, First Focus, Network, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Public Health Association, Share Our Strength, and the list goes on. Harry Truman said, quote, "Nothing is more important in our national life than the welfare of our children, and proper nourishment comes first in attaining this welfare." I will close with the piece that was put out today by the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. Research shows that, and I quote, that the food stamp program is the most effective program pushing against the steep rise in extreme poverty. One reason the SNAP program is so effective in fighting extreme poverty is that it focuses its benefits on many of the poorest households. Roughly 91% of monthly SNAP benefits go to households below the poverty line. 55% go to households below half the poverty line. That's about $9,800 for a family of 3. 1 in 5 SNAP households lives on a cash income of less than $2 per person a day. And how they, earlier in the article it says that the World Bank defines poverty in developing nations as households with children who live on $2 or less per person per day. This is the United States of America. This is not a debate about process. It is not a debate about deficit reduction. It's not about politics. This is a debate about our values and our priorities in this great nation. Let's go back to the days of George McGovern and Bob Dole and those who came forward to say there are those in this country who are starving. There are those who are without food. We sit in the most deliberative body in the world. We can do something about it. Let's do something about it. And I thank the gentleman.
Well, I thank my colleague from Connecticut for her eloquent remarks, and I think tomorrow, hopefully, we can do something about it. I will have an amendment, I hope, if the Rules Committee makes it in order, to restore the SNAP cuts, to reverse the $22.5 billion worth of cuts. And members on both sides of the aisle will have an opportunity to vote up or down on it. I think I think how we vote on that is a statement of our values, and whether we think that government has a role, in fact, indeed, that our community has a role to be there for the least among us. I tell people all the time that hunger is a political condition. You can't find anybody in this place who's pro-hunger, or at least who will admit it. But somehow the political will doesn't exist to end this scourge once and for all. I mean, we can end this. The maddening thing about this problem is that it is solvable. And when people say to me, well, we can't spend any more money, well, my response is, the cost of hunger is so astronomical that we need to figure out a way to end it. And if that means spending a little bit more in the short term, to help extend ladders of opportunity for people to be able to get out of poverty, then we ought to do it. But hunger costs. I mean, kids who go to school who are hungry don't learn. They can't concentrate. They don't learn. Senior citizens who can't afford their medication and their food and take their medication in an empty stomach end up in an emergency ward. One of the pediatricians at Boston Medical Center told me about young children who have gone without food for periods of time, who end up getting something that is nothing more than a common cold, but their immune system is so compromised that they end up spending several days in the hospital. So if you're not moved by the moral imperative to end this problem, then you ought to be moved by the bottom line, which is it costs us a lot of money to not solve this problem. There was this great film that just came out a couple of months ago called A Place at the Table. Two great young filmmakers, Christy Jacobson and Laurie Silverbush, kind of directed this film, and it documents hunger in urban, rural, and suburban America. It shows the face of hunger in America. Young, middle-aged, old, I mean, it is there. And it is heartbreaking. We brought up to our Democratic caucus meeting a few weeks ago some SNAP alumni, people who grew up and who are on food stamps, and who came back to say thank you for investing in them, for helping them get through a difficult time. And many of them now are doctors and lawyers and engineers and professors and, very successful, and paying back much more than we invested in them. We want success stories. We want success stories. This place, this Congress, should be about lifting people up, not telling us how bad things have to be, not telling us that we have to put people down in order to move forward, trample over people, because that's what we're doing when we cut programs like this. I mean, we ought to be thinking big and bold and about how do you end hunger and how do you end poverty in this country. And there is a way to do it. We saw what happened in the 1970s with George McGovern and Robert Dole. I mean, things have obviously changed. Let's perfect this program, but let's connect the dots so that we are creating a circle of protection that actually helps lift people out of poverty. Our goal, I would like to think the goal of those of us on the Democratic side and the goals on the Republican side is to help people become self-sufficient, to succeed. That's what we want. That's what we want. But you are not helping people succeed when you take away food. I mean, that's what is at stake in this farm bill. And, I know the gentlelady agrees with me, and I know she feels very strongly about this, but, we will have an opportunity, hopefully tomorrow, to be able to have a debate and a vote up or down on whether we should, cut this program in a very draconian way, to throw 2 million people off the benefit, hundreds of thousands of kids off of free breakfast and lunch. What happens to those people? What do we tell them to do? Go to your local charity?
Well,
I yield to the gentlelady.
Well, I would just say, you were talking about the effects. It's about growth and development. There's wonderful material which we sent out to our colleagues from Dr. Deborah Frank, who talks about, what happens to children. What happens, it is concentrating, but it is their ability to grow, to develop, to be physically well, and the cost of dealing with you know, what happens to the health issues only adds to our health care costs. And I'm of the view, if you can't deal with the humanity, let's deal with the economics of this. And the studies are so clear about what happens with the absence of food, right, particularly with children.
Right. And I would say to the gentlelady that the points she raises are very, very important because the health of our children should be first and foremost. And we are now experiencing in this country a record level of obesity. And there is a tie-in between food insecurity and hunger and obesity. You know, people who are struggling in poverty do not have the resources to be able to buy nutritious food. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they live in food deserts, and they rely basically on food items to just kind of fill up, you know, stomach with empty calories. Mm-hmm. And so now, you know, we're dealing with that. So, look, if we looked at this issue holistically, we could solve a whole bunch of problems in this country. And I like to think that there's a lot of bipartisan consensus on what we can do. You know, because, you know, in ending hunger and in promoting better nutrition, you know, and trying to build those ladders of opportunity to help people get out of poverty, you know, perfecting these programs to go after the waste, to go after the abuse, to go after those who are outliers in these programs, who choose to try to basically rob the American taxpayer. Let's go after them. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's not just turn our backs on the success stories.
But I would just say this to the gentleman. The program has worked very, very hard, as you know, over the years to decrease that error rate in this program. I don't see the same concentration and the same effort in other programs. And I mentioned here the crop insurance program. There's an article in the paper today that talk about the program is rife with fraud. And why aren't people interested in looking at that effort and the billions of dollars that we are losing every year? For the life of me, I don't understand it. People who view themselves as fiscal hawks, that we have to watch every dime and every dollar, but it is only focused on nutrition programs, anti-hunger programs. One of I think you may have alluded to this earlier, Congressman McGovern. You know, I think so many times that those who would cut these programs and do it in such a savage way just don't have much respect for the people who find themselves in a position to have to participate in the food stamp program. They think they're dogging it. They think they don't want to work. And they think they're looking for charity. And it is such a misconception and a lack of understanding of the difficult economic times that people find themselves in today. And it is, sometimes we ought to walk in people's shoes and understand the lives that they're leading and what they're trying to do. Like those of us who here who believe we work hard and we care, etc. People work hard. They care about their families. They want to make sure their kids are eating. And you know, quite frankly, when it comes to feeding your kids, you'll do whatever you have to do in order to make that happen.
And let me say to the gentlelady that I couldn't agree more. I have met with countless parents who have tearfully told me the anguish that they experience when they're not quite sure whether or not they're going to be able to put food on the table for their children's dinner, or for their breakfast, or for their lunch. I'm the parent of two children, an 11-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. I can't imagine what it would be like to not be able to provide them food. I mean, I think as a parent, nothing could be worse.
Nothing
because your kids are your most important, the most precious and most important things in your life. You know, and so, I mean, this is for real. I mean, this is real life.
In Branford, Connecticut, a woman, 3 boys, 18, 14, and 12. She said that they eat 1 meal a day. Hamden, Connecticut, a woman who says that she has just enough food to feed her children, that she has to say no if they want to invite someone over. She sometimes says she feeds the boys a little bit more because they're hungrier than the girls. Now, we've heard about this internationally, where the girls get short shrift, you know, when it comes to both education and food. My God, it's happening here. It is happening here. And we have the obligation, and I know you take it seriously, our colleagues need to have that sense of moral responsibility to turn this around and do something that's better. Do the right thing. Say no to $20 billion in cuts to a food stamp program.
Well, I thank the gentlelady for her comments and for her passion and for her efforts on this issue. You know, I hope that my colleagues in a bipartisan way will indeed say no to these terrible cuts. It's hard for me to believe that we're going down this road, that we're going down a road where 2 million people are going to lose their food benefits, hundreds of thousands of kids are going to lose their access to free breakfast and lunch, and we're all just kind of saying, you know, it is what it is. Well, it isn't. I mean, this is a big deal, and I don't, you know, quite know why it's easier to pick on programs that help poor people versus programs that help rich people. I mean, you outlined earlier all these kind of little sweetheart deals and special interests kind of giveaways, you know, that kind of go untouched. The whole crop insurance issue, kind of not, the oversight is not what we all think it should be, but yet, you know, a lot of times lucrative interests get those monies. And get those benefits. And, you know, maybe there's a political consequence if you take on a powerful special interest. You know, maybe they won't show up to your fundraiser. Maybe they won't, you know, they'll contribute to a super PAC and say that you're bad. By contrast, you know, poor people don't have a super lobby, don't have a super PAC. And, you know, and so maybe, you know, maybe there's a debate going on, you know, where will I get the most heat, and not what is the right thing to do.
The most disingenuous thing is that there are a number of people in this body who talk about this issue and then themselves are getting subsidies and whether they have commodities or whatever it is, and that's been information that's been in the paper. They will deny the food stamps to, you know, to families who have no wherewithal, but they're taking in, sometimes in some cases, several $1 million in subsidies that are coming from the federal government.
So
then it's okay.
And where's the justice in that?
There is no justice in that.
And, you know, I received a postcard from a young mother who is on SNAP and who is kind of watching this entire debate unfold, and she sent a very simple message to me. It said, "Don't let Congress starve families." I mean, you know, we should be about lifting people up. You know, this is not about a handout. It's about a hand up. This is not about a culture of dependency.
Of plenty.
It's not about creating a culture of dependency. This is about making sure that there is an adequate safety net in this country to deal with people who have kind of fallen on hard times.
With farmers and with families.
Absolutely. We want to, you know, we want a farm bill that supports our farmers, that supports small and medium-sized farmers in particular, that helps promote good nutrition, that helps deal with the challenges that farmers, you know, all across this country face, but it cannot sacrifice. It cannot sacrifice, you know, the well-being of some of the most vulnerable people in this country. And I thank the gentlelady for her
I thank the gentleman
participation.
very much. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentlewoman from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Father's Day was this past Sunday, and I am very thankful that I had an opportunity to spend some time with my father, with my sister and her family, and everybody was there, and had an opportunity to thank him for the role that he has meant and continues to mean in our lives, and to thank him for that. Also an opportunity for my daughter and I to do something special for my husband. But you know, Father's Day also presents us with a great opportunity to focus on the importance of fathers in this country. The presence of a father has such a tremendous impact on the life of each and every child and adult in America. A father serves to provide a sense of protection, guidance, and above all, love for their child. Fathers also push their children to pursue their dreams and to never give up. I think of my own father, Ted Zelmer, and the profound influence that he has had on my life. Not only has he taught me the meaning of hard work and dedication, but he has supported me throughout my entire life to where I am today, representing the good people of Missouri. That's what good fathers do and why they are so important. We learn a lot from fathers, whether it's how to drive a tractor and shoot a free throw like my dad showed me, or how to fix an engine or play baseball. Dads teach us. They also show us how to live by example. Children learn the importance of work and dedication to providing for the family when they see their dad leave for his job each day. They learn the importance of faith when he takes his family to church on Sunday. And they learn the value of family when he prioritizes his time to eat dinner with them each night or to coach their Little League team. We need good fathers now more than ever. Their importance is paramount to another discussion taking place in our nation, and that is the value of marriage in America. Along with Father's Day, June will also bring an important announcement: the Supreme Court's much-anticipated rulings on both the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, and Proposition 8. These cases have put the national spotlight on this issue in a new way and provide an opportunity for Americans to discuss the question, what is marriage? It's not complicated. Marriage exists to bring a man and woman together as husband and wife to become the father and mother for any children that come from that union. Marriage is based on the biological fact that reproduction depends on a man and a woman, and the reality that children need a mother and a father. Redefining marriage would further distance marriage from the needs of children. It would deny as a matter of policy the ideal that a child needs a mom and a dad. We know that children do best when raised by a mother and a father. President Obama is also a strong advocate for the importance of a strong male figure in a child's life. With first-hand experience of growing up without a father, the President works every day to be a great dad for his two daughters. The Obama administration has created many new programs under his Fatherhood Initiative program, including Fatherhood Buzz and Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood Initiative. During the speech, President Obama said that too many fathers are, quote, missing from too many lives and too many homes, having abandoned their responsibilities, acting like boys instead of men. And then he goes on, the President says, we know the statistics, that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and to commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of schools, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They are more likely to have behavioral problems or to run away from home or become teenage parents themselves. And the foundations of our community are weaker because of it, end quote. Clearly, we all agree on the critical role fathers play in the lives of their children, which is why we should continue to affirm marriage as the union of a man and a woman in the interest of children. Every child deserves a mom and a dad. You cannot say that fathers are essential while also making them optional. That's why we're here tonight, to make a case for fathers. Too many times in society they're viewed as optional. Hollywood shows often depict them as buffoons. We know different. and are here to set the record straight. It's time to honor the fathers of America for the vital role they play in not only our families, but also the stability and the well-being of our nation. It's time to show the respect that is due them, encourage men to be better fathers for their children, and champion the vital role they play in marriage. And I'm joined tonight by several of my colleagues, and I appreciate them taking the time to visit about this very, very important topic. And I have my good friend from Kansas, Tim Huelskamp, here, and he's certainly a person who knows a lot about being a good father, because he certainly is one. And I yield my time now to Tim Huelskamp.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Hartzler. I appreciate you leading our efforts and discussion tonight on a very important topic. And obviously, as you do mention, it's oftentimes a forgotten topic. And I'm certain we all have our stories about our dads, and I was really blessed and still blessed with a very active and involved father. And I'll just say, as a farm kid, probably the most poignant story I do recall with my dad was after a hailstorm. And you know, being a farm gal yourself, the damage that the hailstorm does to the family and does to the economy and does to your crops. And we were sitting out in the yard, and there was 3 or 4 inches of hail all around, and we had listened to it bounce off the roof of the pickup for 30 minutes, and then it stopped. I said, oh gosh, what's going to happen next? What's Dad going to say? He put the pickup in gear, and then we drove around in silence for another hour, and then we got out and we went back to work. And that's the kind of message that I learned from my dad, is you don't give up. You roll with the punches, and you keep doing that. And but tonight I don't want to talk just about my father and or my children. I'd love to do that. My wife and I have not been blessed with any of our own biological children. We've been blessed with 4 adopted children. And so there's 4 sets of moms and dads out there that have dedicated children that are in our care. But one thing I do want to speak is directly to fathers that are listening tonight. And fathers, I want to challenge you to be a hero for your children. I want to challenge you to be responsible, committed husbands and fathers to the mothers of your children. I challenge you to live out fatherhood courageously. But to live this courageous, responsible, heroic role as father, it requires marriage. Marriage truly understood as the exclusive and permanent union between one man and one woman coming together to become husband and wife, mother and father to the children. I also like to speak to all of America, and I know, as my colleague has done, you know, it is vital that we encourage fatherhood in the context of marriage and uphold policies that reflect the truth that fathers are not optional, but to play a vital role to their families. And restoring America must begin again on the home front. It begins with encouraging and supporting committed, responsible fatherhood in the context of marriage. We know who the victims of the vicious fatherless cycle is. They are our children. It is our children, the children of America, who are left to suffer the scars of the abandonment of their absentee fathers. And as my colleague noted and quoted the President, he was accurate when he stated, we know the statistics, and again I'll repeat them because they're so powerful. Children who grow up with a father are 4 times more likely to live in poverty and to commit crimes, 9 times more likely to drop out of schools, and 20 times more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from homes. The foundations of our community are weaker because of fatherlessness. Furthermore, absent fathers don't just hurt our children, they wound society. It is a fact that the welfare state has to expand when marriage and families decline. It's been estimated over $229 billion in welfare costs from 1970 to 96 can be attributed to the breakdown of marriage. And specifically, a study of it in 2008, 1 year alone, estimating that divorce and unwed childbearing cost American taxpayers over $120 billion a year. And this was a study more than 5 or 6 years ago. Where there are absentee fathers, it's you, I, your families, our communities, our churches, our neighbors, our cities, and the government will be forced to step in and try to pick up the broken pieces of these shattered marriages. This is not fair to mothers and children. Wives deserve committed husbands. Children deserve protective, responsible fathers. The facts speak to themselves. But one story I will note, and then I'll close quickly, is it was not far from here. A few weeks ago, I was crossing a crowded street here in Washington, D.C., and there was a line of kids. I think they were with a babysitter, and there was about a 2-year-old young boy. And he looked up at his babysitter as he was crossing the street. She was dragging him across, and he asked again. I could hear him. He says, "Who is my daddy? Who is my daddy?" And that babysitter didn't have an answer. "Shh, don't worry about that." He kept asking the question, "Who is my daddy?" You know, we should have an answer. We should have an answer for that little boy. We should have an answer because we should know. We should expect. We should demand. We should promote. We should push. Fathers, encourage them, demand of them to hold up their responsibilities. Because there is a disease in America. It's the disease of fatherlessness. We must overcome the myths in society that see no difference in whether a mom or a dad is involved in a child's life, because there is no doubt. You can look at tons and tons of social science data over and over. It's very clear. But for that 2-year-old boy, that 3-year-old boy, we have to have an answer. Who is his daddy? And the daddy is not his government. He has a daddy. He should be involved. Our policies should reflect that goal, because every child deserves both a mom and a dad. And I look forward, hopefully, as we continue to press forward to solve these problems, we promote marriage and promote fatherhood. And I appreciate your leadership tonight, Vicki, for your efforts here, and I yield back.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you so much, Tim. I think you spoke so eloquently to the importance of fathers and the cost that we have as a society when fathers are not present, and why it's important to have a policy that promotes the father being there for their children. And now I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Georgia and hear what he has to say about the importance of fathers. Thank you, Phil Gingrey.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate so much the gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler, for leading this time on fatherhood, and what a perfect time to do it this evening. We all just came back from our districts and celebrated Father's Day, or Grandfather's Day, and of course we're also awaiting sometime soon, before the end of June, a decision, a momentous decision from the Supreme Court in regard to 2 particular decisions. The one ballot initiative from California, Proposition 8, where the people of California fairly convincingly decided what is a definition of traditional marriage. And of course the other thing is the Defense of Marriage Act, passed right here on this floor and signed into law by President Clinton back in 1996. This is timely, and I commend the gentlewoman from Missouri for bringing it forward and giving us an opportunity to join with our colleagues and talk about something as important as this. That is the definition of fatherhood and how important a father is to a child. But maybe even more important than that, a mother and a father. We don't always have the ideal situation, but that's certainly no reason to throw up our hands and say, let's forget about our faith and family and traditional values and what is the best circumstance for a child. You know, I think, my colleagues, I think a lot about my own children. Of course, they're adults now, and among them they have 13 grandchildren, our grandchildren, their children, and you know, at least one of my son-in-laws had no father present when he was growing up, and that father didn't come to his wedding. That father was not there for the birth of any of his 4 children. That father just basically denies his existence. And I watch that particular son-in-law and my son and my other son-in-laws, but particularly him, because of the experience that he went through as a child, how much he loves his children, how kind and caring and loving he is, and how important he is in their lives. And I realize today that the father knows best, and on that traditional view that we all had back in the old days of television is different. It's changed, and I do understand that. Of my 3 daughters and 1 daughter-in-law, they all work. They all work. Some of them full-time, some of them part-time. But they're still there as moms. And when they come home and take over that responsibility, they need a shared partner, and that partner is that partner for life. And I'm talking about, of course, the father. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be with my colleagues tonight and just say that, maybe part of the problem is we need to go back into the schools at a very early age, maybe at the grade school level, and have a class for the young girls, and have a class for the young boys, and say, this is what's important. This is what a father does that is maybe a little different, maybe a little bit better than the talents that a mom has in a certain area, and the same thing for the young girls, that this is what a mom does, and this is what is important from the standpoint of that union, which we call marriage, and we have called that since the beginning of this country and long before the beginning of this country. So as I close and yield back to the gentle lady and thank her for giving me some time, I stand strongly for the Defense of Marriage Act and traditional marriage as we know it, and don't take that right away from our states. But this is a wonderful opportunity to say, young men, you've got a great responsibility. You're not a father unless you prove it. And I yield back to the gentlewoman.
Thank you so much, Phil. That's well spoken from a proud grandfather as well as a father, and certainly brought up the importance of fatherhood, and as well as these decisions that are coming up from the Supreme Court. The people have spoken on that. The people of California spoke 2 times, and they said this is what we think is wise public policy for the families and the citizens of California. And the people spoke on Defense of Marriage Act through their elected representatives here in Congress. Huge vote, bipartisan, and President Clinton signed the bill. The people have spoken on this, and what we don't want is to have the Supreme Court impose their view or be activists impose their view of what marriage should be on the citizens who have spoken. So it's going to be interesting to see how they rule, but certainly I agree with you, Phil, that it's very important that the people have spoken and that we uphold marriage. Next we have a representative from Oklahoma, a friend of mine, James Lankford, who not only is a great dad and father, but has worked with teenagers for many years, and I'm sure has seen the importance of fatherhood as he relates to young people. So go ahead, James Lankford.
Yeah, thank you. I thank the gentlelady for hosting this time. There's a lot of things I've talked about in the well of this House. I've talked about budget. I've talked about growing economy. About jobs. I've talked about transportation. I've talked about the relationship of the individual citizen and their government, and how that relationship works or sometimes doesn't work, and lately. But this is a time just to be able to pause for a moment and not talk about necessarily some new government law or some new regulation, but to celebrate for just a moment dads. With Father's Day this past weekend, and to be able to hesitate again and be able to say thanks to my own dad, but to also talk about the fact that it is the love of our life for men to be able to enjoy their children just like it is for ladies to be able to enjoy their children as well as a mom. There is something very unique, and I believe firmly that every child needs a mom and needs a dad. They come at parenting from 2 different directions, and they together make such a dramatic difference in the life of a child. To have a mom and to have a dad. It's interesting to me that the last verse in the Old Testament, in that verse from Malachi 4:6 in that minor prophet book, it ends that Old Testament by saying the role of the prophet will be to turn the hearts of the children to their fathers and to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, to be able to see that restoration. In that time period, there was a collapse for a moment in the families, and they suffered as a nation and saw that. We see that today in our own families. 15 million children live life without a father. 15 million. In 1960, there were only 11% of the homes that didn't have a father. Today, it's over a third of the homes that don't have a father. And as we've watched all the consequences that occur with that in our own economy, in our own family, in our own culture, it's just the separation that happens. We see a greater emphasis right now with trying to figure out what to do in schools, as parents seem to be disconnected from their children and teachers struggle in that community. And things have changed in our schools with an absence of fathers, as we've seen the families collapse. We've seen an increase in poverty. Some colleagues were here earlier speaking about hunger in America, which is rampant and is a huge issue for us as a nation. And they mentioned that in the 1970s, we had a very low hunger rate in America. And it's interesting for us to come here now and talk about fathers and how that has changed. And from that point in 1970, when we had a very low hunger rate in America, now to look at the difference now with a very high hunger rate in America and also a very low presence of fathers in the lives of their children. We've seen something different happen in families as fathers disconnect from their children and they no longer see a role to be able to be a provider, and they've required government to go be the provider for children when it was never designed to be that way. And that's not where it is best. Children have a higher risk of poverty. Children have a lower graduation rate from high school, have a lower entry rate into college. There's not a safe environment for children when there's an absence of a dad and a mom. It's different for them as they grow up and as they process through things. And the stability that can come to a child with the presence of a mom and of a dad. So what do we do about it? It's the challenge. Well, quite frankly, there are issues in our marriage laws right now as a nation that we have where there are penalties to be married in our tax law. There are penalties even in our disability benefits as we try to reach in and help families as they're disabled. But yet if they're married, it's a lower rate. So we look at that and we ask the question, why would we punish a family for being married because one of the individuals there is disabled? That doesn't make sense for us. And so we need to look at our policies that we have and to be able to encourage rather than discourage marriage, because we know what that happens. It's the reason that the federal government's involved at all in the marriage relationship, is because we know what happens in the lives of children when a man and a woman are committed to each other for life. That commitment, the reason the government's connected to that, is because of what happens in the lives of children and how it benefits people in the days ahead. So we need to look at the marriage penalty that's occurring in our tax law and our disability rules and such. But quite frankly, most of the issues that deal with fatherhood and from the absence of fathers won't happen because of a change in federal law. It'll happen when families turn and mentor young couples and they get personally involved in the lives of young families. For some individuals that they've never seen a functioning man and a woman married and committed to each other for life. They've never seen that in their community, and they haven't experienced that in their own family. It's so important for older couples to mentor young couples, to pass on the wisdom that they have gained. It's quite frankly very important at the marriage altar for two individuals to truly commit to each other for life. That brings stability not only to those two individuals, but also brings stability to the children as well, as they grow up in a home where there's some emotional security and safety and not the constant fear of separation and of loss of either the mom or the dad. So for individuals to be committed to each other for life makes a big difference in that. So what can happen? Well, I talked about the federal policies, but it's really individuals. Individuals mentoring other individuals, and it's two individuals when they approach the marriage altar, knowing that I'm going to commit to each other and I'm going to work through the problems that we have, because that's what's best for our nation and that's what's best for the children that are coming up, to provide them that stable home where they can grow up. Do we always get it perfect? No. But we know economically, we know emotionally, the strongest homes and what's best for our children is for a mom and a dad. And I want to honor dads that do commit to walk through the hard, difficult days and to say to them, keep going. Don't give up, dads. And as you face through hard times, your children need you. It is the single most difficult part of my job, is getting on an airplane on Monday mornings and flying away from my two daughters and my wife. No other moment of my week is harder than that one. because I know the importance of being a dad to my daughters, and they need me. And I encourage dads today to live out the commitment that you have made to your wife and the commitment you've made to your children. With that, I yield back.
Great, great words. Thank you.